Hello, my name is Margaret Adele, and welcome to another indie book review. And I am super proud of myself because I set for myself a Pride TBR, and I am actually reading the books on it. I don't always have the best track record with actually reading the books when I make a TBR, but today I am reviewing Blood and Vinyl by Ignacio Limon. This is a book from a longtime Twitter mutual of mine. Iggy is one of those ride or dies that is like always liking your tweets and like it's a real thing. He's such a sweetheart. And I was really excited to get to this one for a multitude of reasons. A, it's a Twitter mutual, and I always love when those indie authors I've befriended before the review give me their books. And also, Iggy is a trans Latinx man, and I was really intrigued to get more trans authors on my list. I don't have many to recommend yet. I'm working on it. But this story I would describe as having a lot of potential, but needing a little bit more reworking. I believe in my written review, I described it as a jigsaw puzzle in which every piece is beautiful, but they're kind of shoved together. Now, if you look at the synopsis of this book, it's a little hard to figure out exactly what the main point of conflict is. And that kind of holds. There is a very wide cast of characters. There are many big groups of supernaturals, from bevies of vampires, which bevy is basically like bevy is to vampire what coven is to witches, and there are covens of witches, and there's so many characters. I think it's in the dozens at some point, but as a result, there's a lot going on, and a lot of it's a little bit confusing. But suffice to say, this is basically a power play between different bevies and covens as things go wrong, and they kind of have to reevaluate things, and they're vying for power. And there is a kidnapping and rescue plot as the story goes on. And I won't tell you who gets kidnapped or what they have to do to rescue them. That you can find out on your own. But yes, the conflict is a little bit all over the place. Hence why I said beautiful pieces, a little bit jumbled up together. And the other struggle with this one is that the descriptions are fantastic in small pieces. I think one of my favorite ones was when a character was described as wearing jeans that were holier than the Pope. That was very amusing. There's also a lot of use of gems and diamond type names, jewels and the like, to describe like skin color, eye color, what have you. The problem is that I can't remember a single one of them off the top of my head right now. Aside from the obvious ones where it's onyx hair or whatever. Because mostly what I would do is I would skim down to the bottom because there were footnotes, and the footnotes would explain what that gem looks like. Which, smart move, because I was not going to know what that color was. But most of the time I would just drop down to the bottom and be like, all right, this gem is reddish brown. Okay, this person is a character of color. Okay, moving on. Or they would get into very, very deep descriptions in very large chunks that kind of went over my head a lot of the time. It's kind of like an info dump, but for character descriptions, wherein we have a coven of witches led by this trans woman named MJ. I loved her. And she walks into this cafe to see all of the members of her coven sitting there, and all of them are described at once. And so in my head, I know that the descriptions were awesome, but all I can remember is okay, this one is the nominal Muslim that's pretty enough to be a model. This one is the Korean one with tattoos. And that's it. That's all that's stuck in my head. And it's a very diverse cast. But when you have so much very elegant multiple line descriptions all put together for a large group of people, gone. None of it retains. In that instance, you gotta kind of be more careful as you lay out the characters. And like I said, giant cast. Mostly, as far as I can tell, witches, vampires, and magical vampires, which are this weird kind of, they're not really a third class, but there's something integrated in and normal for the most part. So that one was really interesting. And I'm not quite sure I fully understand how the world works in a lot of ways. The story is very short. It is only about 170 to 180 pages, I believe. A lot of the books I get for review are done in PDF copies that may have different formatting than the one you buy from Kindle or what have you. So it could be something different, but I don't think it's much longer than 200 pages in any format. So there was space to break it up, to pull it apart and give everything a little bit more room to breathe, especially some of the power systems and dynamics. Like, I know there was this one vampire bevy here that was kind of low-key at war, but also in like a kind of low-key truce. Let's just work together to do the thing for right now with this vampire bevy. And then this vampire bevy had like members that were connected to MJ and her coven. And it's a lot. It's like Game of Thrones-esque. Who is with who is mad at who is pulling power plays on who. In less than 200 pages, it is very confusing to kind of figure out where everyone is in the situation. So that could have used a little bit more. Now, once I got it, I was like, okay, this is cool. And I like the intricacies of that kind of thing. We just needed a little bit more space to understand it. Speaking of more space, the other thing that could use a little bit more is the plot tended to treat whatever happened next as being such a given that they didn't give you a heads up as to what was happening next. For example, they would say, oh, we need to get this specific thing. They wouldn't even tell you what the specific thing was, just that they needed it from this place. And then the very next chapter or next scene where we went back to them, because it did vary on the subplots that it focused on, they'd be like in the middle of a pre-planned raid into this place. And you're like, when did we get there? I don't even remember the thing we're going for. And no one actually said, okay, we're going to raid the place. Like those kind of things where it's like, yes, if you do it too much, it's spelling out for the reader what's going to happen. It may be undermining the reader's intelligence, but you need something to be like, okay, psst, this is what we're doing next. Which didn't happen a lot in this book. So I would have liked a little bit more heads up, a little bit more transition, and just transition scenes in general, some more explanation scenes. There was at least one character, the Amnesiac, who I think his name is pronounced Lyle, but it may also be Lale, who was new to this whole scene and could have been the person that everything was explained to if you really needed to spell some things out, because low-key I did need some things spelled out. So that probably would have been a little bit more helpful. But like I mentioned before, all the pieces that were in this jigsaw puzzle were beautiful in their own right. The characters are very lovable. I love Lyle, whatever I'm calling him. They're very diverse. They're very intriguing with the power and magic systems, and their desires are all set out. The setting is also a character in its own right, because it is set in the mid-2000s. I think the majority of the plot takes place in 2006, and it is very 2006. At one point, a character mentioned pulling out his razor phone, and I was like, oh, middle school, I am back. It was very amusing. However, there are some times where it's like, there's a lot of references to alternative bands and alternative culture in that era that went right over my head, because they're like naming all these bands, and at first I thought they were all like fake bands, like, oh, we're just coming up with band names. But then they mentioned AFI, which is a band I know and was at the height of their popularity in like the mid-2000s emo scene. So I'm like, oh wait, are these bands real? So if you know about that culture and you appreciated those bands, it'll be a lovely little Easter egg for you. If not, you can just enjoy all of the most ludicrous band names lumped together as the characters talk about them. But regardless, I did appreciate the setting. There's not too many books written after the fact set in the 2000s. Very few books as of right now that are written basically like historical fiction written in the 2000s as of right now. But I enjoyed that one, and all the pieces were beautiful, and can be done beautifully. the structure they were set in just needed a little bit more structure. A little bit more scaffolding, if you will. Separate some things out, give some transition scenes so it flows a little better, give a little bit more explanations, introduce the characters a little bit more slowly so that their descriptions make a little bit more sense and we get a bigger sense of who's playing for which team. But all the characters are intriguing. We do have an MLM relationship that I thought was super cute, even as I thought, like, this is low-key toxic and unhealthy, but also, aw. Which I think is how you're supposed to view it. Like, it's not like, oh, they're doing these toxic things and sweeping it under the rug. Like, no, things are going wrong and there will likely be a comeuppance for one of the characters in that relationship. But I appreciated it. I probably will not continue with this series. I gave the book 3 stars, but would definitely read something else from Iggy. And it's always difficult because when you get books from friends, you want to give them shining gold 5 stars. But I also fully believe that reviews can help authors improve and kind of like get down to the nitty-gritty with their craft. And Iggy is still one of my favorite Twitter mutuals regardless. So I hope if you like this kind of thing, you will definitely look into it, and I hope to read more of his work moving forward. Now, if you are an indie author and you would like a review, please send me an email. I will have my email down in the description below. I will also have my review policy down there. Please give that a read through. It answers a lot of questions and saves us a lot of time. And with nothing else to say, I hope you have a wonderful day and a marvelous tomorrow.